that can pull out some like patterns I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot about like organization and being more organized. That's one thing that I saw that is exciting for me to see.
A couple people noted this, those of us who have students out in the field, and doing observations virtually was a huge time saver because you're not, I mean, bottom line, when you're driving to a site, you're not doing anything but driving. And so it's a lot of lost time. And so this semester, I'm going back into the close schools, so the GR area schools, to do those insight, but I know now how well those virtual observations actually worked.
Did you feel like I assume too, like you can give students tips on like, put camera placement, stuff like that, to have those even better from your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a good idea. Because some of them were observations in a one-on-one setting with the student. So we had to go through the permission process and that kind of thing. But then even classrooms and small groups. And so that's something that is a really good idea I'm going to take forward. So I'm going to put that on my, now what? Helping them to understand how to do that better.
For sure. Yeah, Craig, I think you're the next one with your hand up there.
Yeah, just kind of building off of Judy's comment, I wonder if the takeaway here is, if we go back to in-person observation of field students, would it make sense to hire drivers for faculty to kind of recapture that time so that we could, sort of do some work on the way, that and, the hotspot internet connection, just something to consider. I'm sure that would be well within the budget.
Yeah, we'll put that on the agenda.
Yeah. Well, my husband's retiring in April, so you know what? We'll get him a job.
Perfect. So, Judy, the fact that you're still doing the ones in person, is that like, am I reading that to where you still think those in-person ones are a better observation for you, or not necessarily?
I think it's selfish on my part. I missed being in schools and having that contact with K-12 students. And I also think because the first observation includes the administrator in the building, I think that's a more powerful opportunity for me to advocate for the student, for the internship experience, for what school counseling is supposed to be. And so that person-to-person connection, I think, is important. And I don't think that translated as well in a virtual environment. Now, our distance learners, we're still doing it that way. But as long as I can get one in-person observation of our local students, I'm good. I've given them the option, and I have the space this semester to be able to do that. If they want those observations virtual, I'll do them after we've done one personal, face-to-face, but the other ones can be virtual as well.
Do you see like significant difference, like with you being out of the room? Does that like change like the nature of what you're observing, or does your presence not really make an impact? I've talked to some people in like teacher ed program who they've felt that taking themselves out of the scenario, so you're not, there's not like this weird person in the corner, type of thing, and just having a camera instead is significantly changes the experience for.
That's a good question. I think that would be something that I'd need to ask our interns about, because I try to be as inconspicuous as possible. And whether I was observing, especially in an individual session, whether I'm there personally or virtually, I always would chat with the student to make them feel comfortable, to help them understand what my purpose was. And so regardless, I think I could make myself go away. The one thing I did note is that if I didn't get rid of the camera and everything, I had a couple students, not my students, but K-12 students, who would kind of look over to see how they looked on the camera. So sure, yeah. That was more on the intern end than anything else.
Yeah. That's how you go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say, I was just, as I was looking over the first frame there, or the first slide, I was wondering who might have put on the comment around the Go Reaction observation tool. Just curious to hear a little more about that.
So I can share. I know in the past we used to ask our students to record themselves at least once during student teaching, and they never wanted to. They were always making excuses while they couldn't do it because of their phone or their camera. And with GoReact, they had to do it. And so we are still using GoReact. It went very well, but in some schools we couldn't, we didn't have access to students because the students were, I think for FOIA purposes, they couldn't turn their cameras on. So we were observing just like boxes with students' names on them. You could hear the teacher, but you couldn't see anything. So that part was really, really not good. And some schools did have face-to-face, but now we are still requiring Go React because we all have accounts. We are doing face-to-face, but we still think there's a lot of value in having students see themselves on video during their apprenticeship and internship.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, I know you being a former principal and a couple of us being former administrators in schools and districts, it makes a lot of sense for our students to see themselves teaching, just like for us in our own classrooms to see our teaching and our instruction, to see whether or not there's some opportunities for change or tweaks or adjustments to instruction.
Oh, absolutely. Go React is so user friendly. They can send us a video or they can do Go React Live. And then it has built in these markers. So if you see somebody like covering targets, you can just stop the video and type in a comment. And then it's really made observation conferences easier because you don't need to write out the long observation form because all the comments are there. And we still have a modified observation form, but it really helped with all the ideas of going paperless. We used to drag around, files all the time. And that was a big thing for our field coordinators because some of them aren't so confident with the technology, but just having wireless was a big issue for some of them because they just weren't accustomed to it.
Thanks, Raul.
Raul, I have a question. So I'm looking at Go React right now, and I've started using Panopto for the final observation for our students where they record it. They have to do their own reflection based on their skills before I give any feedback. Is this adaptable that you can put in your own reflection criteria or your own standards or rubrics?
Yeah, you can, we loaded our rubrics for student teaching for the practicum.
Ooh.
And then Go React also has all these markers, which are just like the teaching core practices that we are expecting to see with students. And
Awesome.
yeah, you can do that. And you can, during Go React, the teacher can also add like a slideshow if they're using that. And then it's just super student friendly. Some students have complained that they do have some difficulty with it, but then we can still get video from the swivel cameras. And it didn't work so well with Zoom, but now I think it works now with Zoom. So that's been a plus because we were doing Zoom observations as well with some students.
Yeah.
During the practicum. But yeah, you can upload any your standards and your rubrics there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we all have an account. And so we saved money with mileage last year. So Amy was able to get everybody an account. So the class faculty, our adjuncts and our faculty and our students all have a Go React account. So we said, could we keep it? Can we still use it? And so she said that because we did save money and we're doing less observations face to face. So there's money to continue having Go React accounts for our interns.
Any other observations from the positive ones?
I started for the first time building in a mental health week for everyone. I didn't call it that. I called it like this it was like around week 7 or week 10, depending on what I did. It was kind of like a 7th inning stretch kind of thing where they just had to go post a picture in the discussion board of something they did for themselves to fill them up, if you will. Not working extra long, that didn't count. If you don't get a chance and you like to cook, you can cook. If you want to go out to nature, you can go out to nature. But something that filled them up because it was kind of 2/3 of the way through or midterm, depending on when I did that. And what I noticed in the past, because I teach fully online graduate students, and they just kind of peter out. 14 weeks is a really long time. Life happens, they get busy, work, family, responsibilities, whatever it is. So when I did that, it enabled them to catch up whatever they were feeling stressed about, maybe not all the way, but at least it made an impact on them because they were able to finish strong. And I hadn't done that before, but it worked well. So I did it the second semester too, but I arranged my content so I wasn't skipping my content. I just kind of compacted it the week prior and the week after to make sure I still hit, or put it somewhere else in the course to make sure I still hit those topics. But that really helped them finish. I've taught adjuncting for like 8 years at GVSU, and I've always seen that kind of, participation drops off. They lose points when they should get an A, they get a B because they decided not to participate and that things got busy. So I tried that, it really worked. So I tried it again, and I would probably do that again. And I think just the added stress with all that COVID stuff, and they had sick family members or they were sick and all that stuff, that they were able to kind of keep it together through the end strong. So that was something I tried. It worked well.
Cool. Anyone, before we move on to the negative stuff, anybody else have any comments? One thing I saw a few things people talking about, like flipped classroom. Someone said flipped classroom was a revelation. And I kind of also connected that to this: discovered my lecture skills weren't the end all be all, found new ways. Anyone have any ideas or, discover anything about their teaching kind of along those lines? Those are the other kind of major pattern I saw. Yeah, Jerry.
Well, yeah, those two sticky notes you just read were mine. It goes along a little bit with what Kelly just said. I found I taught a 7-week hybrid class last summer, one of my classes that I'm used to meeting all the time with, and the rules of the class only allowed us to meet twice for lengthy days over that 7 weeks. And I was all freaked out about what were they going to do without me. And I sort of figured out that my grad students did just fine without me, and they got all the material they needed because I was able to put all of the material there. And I think that it strikes me that I think over the 24 years I taught here before this started, I had convinced myself, or become convinced, because it's what we always did, that those 2.5-hour lectures in class were the thing, because they were the thing. And now I found out that the classroom experience is a whole lot better if I give them the material in bites they can digest on their own, and then use my time together to help them integrate it and ask questions and do exercises. I had no idea that there was a thing called the flipped classroom. I thought I was being a genius at the beginning of all this, and then I realized y'all been doing it forever. So, which is good. So I would, if I'm ever back in the classroom, I'm going to do it exactly the same way if I decide to go back. And I too have found that a week off here and there from a synchronous class helps them re-energize, and they still get the material because it's all there, right? And so yeah, I had to check myself an awful lot, and check my own ego, and check my own attitudes about what does and doesn't work, and I think I'm better for it. So, and I think my students are better for it as well. So
Yeah. My line to a lot of people whenever I talk about flipped classroom is if you ever ask students to read something, theoretically, before class, theoretically, you have flipped your class. I think the problem is a lot of faculty just make the assumption, and a lot of the time it's a correct assumption, that students aren't reading that. So instead, when they come in, you just regurgitate what was in the reading that you assume they didn't read, which maybe they didn't. But yes, I think that's breaking that cycle is critical, which sounds like you did. All right, we move on to the negative things. I didn't look through these, so I don't have patterns in my head yet. But does anyone want to talk about some of the negative things they found or they tried that didn't work out last year? Or I guess even right now, probably still?
I'll go.
Go for it.
Hi, I don't know everyone, but my name is Layla McLeod. I'm new to the higher ed program. I think the thing that didn't work for me is it was just exhausting. So I taught at Western Illinois last year. So the fall was this, I'm sorry, I can't get my years together. I'm still in COVID time, but I taught all in person last year. And I think the mix of online and in person is exhausting to teach online, because I felt like I had to do even more prep for, oh, what if Wi-Fi goes out? Does everybody have access to the Google folder so they can pull the materials for their small group? So there's just a lot, in my opinion, a lot more prep work that had to happen initially to teach online, and just being mindful of everybody's energy. So again, everyone's at home, everybody has different levels of energy, kids at home, pets at home, taking care of other family members. So trying to think of how can I grab your attention while I have it. I'm also tired too, but how do we do this on a screen for 2.5 hours or however long the class was? So I think just the amount of prep work that I initially had to put in was exhausting for me, but also I'm at home, I have 2 monitors. My students don't have 2 monitors, right? So I can maneuver, but also being mindful that students don't have this. I had students who were working on their cell phone. I teach graduate students who were on cell phones. So just having all of that in my brain while also trying to teach was exhausting in a different way that I hadn't anticipated. But it worked out once I got the rhythm, got the students in a pattern of knowing what we would do. So I think, to go back to the earlier question, what did work, I got better at telling students what would happen in class so they could prepare. So it wasn't like, okay, what are we doing today? They got kind of like an agenda before class about, okay, this is what we're going to cover. So that helped, but even still just being prepared for all of the what ifs that happen when everybody's on the internet and being pulled in a million different ways. So
I definitely found myself like physically more tired after doing like synchronous online classes than like an in-person class. Like I way more tired for sure.
Yeah, I also thought to add to Layla's comments that, you know, teaching like a synchronous online class in those sessions, a lot of work to keep people engaged. You know, even you wouldn't think, I don't know, maybe it's just my students, maybe it's me, but I found that there were times where I'd even have to, even when we had established norms, where I'd have to, you know, remind people to keep their screens up if they could, you know, and I get it that with K-12 and even undergraduate students, sometimes we can't have, you know, they can't always have their screens up for privacy and stuff. But as graduate students, I always felt like, okay, we can all have our screens on and so we can see each other and that visualization. But that was tough at times, and even just to get people to talk. I mean, it's it's difficult sometimes to get them to engage at that, you know, higher than a rudimentary level of engagement.
Yeah, Rel, do you have your hand up? You're muted.
Yeah, I know for a seminar, we started doing like Zoom for distance students and students that were quarantined. And in the beginning, I think even for a class I did, EDF 100, it was just so hard because there'd be students on Zoom or on Collaborate, and so oh, somebody's asking a question. And so just trying to go back and forth was just impossible sometimes. And I know students say, oh, somebody's asking a question, you're not. I had one student, I think she made herself monitor, so that worked out really well. She would say, look up at the screen. She said, somebody's trying to ask you something. And then she said, your mask is upside down. And I was like, it just reflected, you know, how I was feeling, just totally confused and lost or something. And sometimes the connections wouldn't work. A student said, well, my Wi-Fi or my connection is bad. I'm in a rural area. And then students, again, with like what Rick said, they would say, oh, my camera's not working. So, you know, I can't check in. And then when we go on break, you know, it looks like they would just sign in and then maybe not be there. And just stuff like that.
Judy, get your hand up.
Yeah, we were all asynchronous in our program. And so and we had started teaching online in fall 2019. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve to get used to it because we were 100% face-to-face before that. But I think from my perspective, what didn't work well was constantly working, because I would be modifying the curriculum as I always do to move, you know, improve continuously. But I'd be a week ahead, students would be working on another module, and just the mental organization piece for me was, okay, what was it that you all are working on? Because my brain's over here in this one. And so that was just a mental organization piece. And in May, once the semester was over, I realized the lie that I'd been telling myself that I was fine was a great big huge lie. And there just wasn't the energy. Like, I teach tonight and it will take me, and many of you are probably in the same boat. I teach in person tonight and it'll take me an hour and a half to wind down once I get home, because there's so much energy in the room and so much energy that I have. And I would leave a workday just exhausted. And by May, it was like, oh girl, you just lied to yourself for 15 weeks. You were not okay. So that was, it's more of the mental health end from my perspective, I think. And don't know if it was mental health, mental exhaustion.
Found too, like for myself at a certain point, like the novelty of like working from home very much wore off. And it was like I miss, like, I mean, even little things, like I don't physically move, like when I'm in the office, I'm physically moving, from meeting to meeting, and just that like little movement makes a big difference. Things like that, like really, like I only live like 3 minutes from campus, but even going to camp, it makes a big difference. Like it puts me in a totally different mindset. It just, yeah, it's that kind of say, I feel like it's a similar thing. Like it was better for me to get out and at least have a change of scenery every day. Like we've
What
kind of
did,
hit on it a little bit, but there was a few comments on high flex as well.
I was just going to say, what didn't work for me at all was high flex. That so I even went so far as to take this camera set up and my microphones and all of that down there so I could have the half that were at home actually watching me work the classroom as if they were in the room. Yeah, so I have this camera that I could take a tripod down that I have a remote control on that moves and zooms, and so I could set it up so those at home behind, and I keep pointing behind me because they're up on the screen, could actually, their view was looking in on the room, and but still with questions coming from there and coming from here, and the small group thing went out the window because I didn't realize that if they're in small groups, if I pop into those small groups, they come through the speaker so that the whole room hears what's going on in theirs. And I never got the headphone thing around, and even with all that extra technology, the quality of the room went like this. I can't imagine doing it sitting behind that little camera in class behind the stand and trying to pull that off. So I will, if that went away and we never heard that word again, I'd be fine. So it just didn't work at all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily fully agree that if it goes away, we'd be better off. I do think it does offer some flexibility to our students that we haven't offered in the past. And now, of course, we do have some real valid reasons why students would need to participate in a virtual class due to medical issues and things like that, or participate in a face-to-face class virtually. But I do agree, technology-wise, it's a lot to manage. And in fact, I had that same situation, Jerry, where when we did small groups, I'd send them into the virtual people into breakouts, and then I'd tell the people who were in the class with me that you had to go to another room because, I knew that the it was going to come into the room, and so I was like, yeah, you got to go to another room to talk with your small group. I do feel though that the more I tried to operate that way, the more that I became more efficient at it. I don't know if it's ever going to be good, but I don't know. It seems like we've surveyed our graduate students, and it seems like there's some demand for it. I'm not sure that that's the only method, but yeah, it's out there. And I know that new classroom 121E is being designed to provide that kind of flexibility. But yeah, it's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up, Jerry.
Yeah, Judy, do you have some?
Yeah, the other thing, this is something that didn't work well, but I think I found a fix to it a little bit, was with being all asynchronous, that's truly on-demand learning for our students. And what that translated into was their thinking that that meant on-demand access to instructor. And those of us who are in education, in helping professions, have to set boundaries and model boundaries for our students as a protection against burnout. And so I understand a lot of them are working on the weekends, but that's the time I needed to unplug to some extent. So what I started was on Blackboard, I got a question, get an answer discussion board, and students are instructed. It's like the old, K-12 ask three and then me, where they could post their questions and then respond to each other. Hey, did you watch this Panopto video? Or this is where this particular resource is. And then I would simply be able to monitor that and then log in and correct any misinformation, or if there's a question that couldn't be answered, I could just go in and post it in that space. And so if a student would email me, I'd say, that's already been answered, go here on Blackboard. And so it was one way to try to protect some boundaries for myself, because otherwise, and I do not have my school email on my phone, which is probably a horrible thing, but it's me. Thank you, Layla. It's setting boundaries, and I have to for my own sanity.
So Justin, that's probably a good segue into our third slide, is what I'm thinking. And if you go back to our Jamboard, the third slide is so what? And it's a little more complex than just asking the question, so what? Really what we want to be thinking about. So what does it mean? So what does this experience mean for us? What does it mean for us as instructors in our particular programs as we go forward? And the fourth slide is kind of a continuation of that, which is now what? So I would actually probably just say, toggle back and forth between those two slides. So what does it mean? I think back to Jerry's example when he was bringing up the hybrid high flex. And so what does it mean? Does it mean that we need to reconsider this new modality that we've brought into play? Does it need to be examined more closely? And if it is, the next question is, now what? Now what are we prepared to do about it? What is it? What are the implications for our work going forward? Because remember, the premise of this BigByte is, so what did I learn about teaching in the pandemic? And that's kind of our end goal, is to figure out a way for us to walk away with some new ideas about how do we not just think about our own individual instruction and what we can do as instructors, but also, where does this go for us as a collective group of educators at Grand Valley in terms of what our teaching platform looks like in the future? So if you wouldn't mind, and certainly for this part of the protocol, I would say, please post some to each of those two, slide 3 and slide 4, some of your ideas, but also if people are open to it. Well, actually, let's just go ahead and take a few minutes. Let's take 5 minutes to go ahead and post. We know we've got till 11:30. So if we take 5 minutes to post, and then we can do some discussion prior to ending it out for the day. So Justin, would you do me a favor and do a timer?
Yep, I'll start my timer. All right.
So let's kind of open it up on both of those slides, 4 and 5. But let's just start with so what? So what is it? I mean, what are some implications of this? What does it mean to you or to us as instructors in our work at Grand Valley? See some good comments on an instructional strategy like make bite-sized lessons when possible. This focuses instructors' attention in one area, makes content easier to create, reuse, and makes it easier to students to digest.
One thing I see that jumped out too is over communicate expectations with students. That's something I always find in faculty who haven't taught online. They're teaching online for the first time. They always question how much I'm telling them they should, how long their instructions need to be, or how detailed they need to be. People are just like, oh, but it's in the document. It's like, no, put it in the description as well. So that's one thing I think is really important to communicate.
Yeah, I agree. I noticed that not just myself, but also a couple other instructors that I've been observing and working with, that they are sending out weekly messages for their online classes at the same time, same day, every week, and even going, and these are graduate students, and even saying things like, hey, we're in week 9. In week 9, you should be blah, blah, blah here in this module. These are the activities you should have completed. It sounds a little bit like you're spoon feeding, but you know what? One thing we got to remember is these graduate students, especially our professionals, they're working professionals. They're doing this on the weekend. They exhale on Friday. They come to their Blackboard site on Saturday, and they look and they're like, okay, I was here last week, and now how am I going to restart this? So I think just being really detailed and supporting them in terms of communication is a great point, Justin, or whoever put that on the Jamboard. Other ones, there's some really good ideas up there.
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is just the flexibility, right? So we moved within the last year and a half. Higher education has changed faster than like 300 years, right? And so there's just, students have been asking for this, but for those of us that are used to being in brick and mortar institutions, our for-profit peers have been doing this for decades now, right? And so I think we're kind of just seeing that there's a need for it, it works, but also that faculty need to be taught how to do this, right? So it's one thing for you to tell me, here's all this technology. It's another thing for you to teach me how to use it. Then I also have to teach my students how to use it, which I think somebody made comments about. And we're not trained to do that, right? And so there's a learning curve for us as faculty. Like, yeah, I can use Flipgrid, but I have to learn how to use it, what to use it for, and then teach my students how to use it. So I felt at my previous institution, we were thrown, use this, how? And then I have to build into my class to get the students up. So I think if anything, it's just pushed us further to be more inclusive for students, but also recognizing, again, I came from an institution that was in a rural area. Wi-Fi was a huge issue, just even for faculty, right? So imagine our students who are now at home all over the state and in other states, what that means. So it just has pushed us to reimagine higher education in ways that we probably wouldn't have had this not happened. So.
Yeah, your point about this, your point about the student, your point about student training is really near and dear to my heart. That was what my master's thesis was on online orientations for students. I think there are a lot of community colleges in Michigan have required basically technology orientations or online orientations. Before, they were just about like, if you want to take an online class, you had to take this like 1 credit class. Sometimes it was free, sometimes it was like very, very cheap. They do it in various ways. Yeah, I've been a proponent of that forever. And we do have like the generic online orientation for all students, and I was the one who designed it, but it's very minimal. Like there's no instructor behind it. So like it's all has to be auto graded. There's no actual like real interaction necessarily, because it's not, to really do it right, in my opinion, you have to basically have a person where it's their job to do it, because you have to make it feel like a class. That's going to take resources. So yeah, I agree. I think that would make a big, big difference. Yeah,
go ahead, Roel.
I have undergraduates right now, and my class is online. One of them is completely online. And I did a midterm reflection with them. And so a lot of them just said that I needed to do more, like I should remind them about what they should be doing, like on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And then they said, they were confused about things on Blackboard, and they have like a course outline, but it still seems like they, I think they're overwhelmed with a lot of their other classes. And so, I only teach one online, but if they're taking more and they have other courses, they did mention that they tended to just not deal with online courses and just focused on their face-to-face courses. And then, they said, and so now, I didn't read, and I have this assignment that's due, and I don't understand what you're asking me to do. And so I just realized that, if they are taking one online, that class, and several students said that I push it to the back and not worry about it. And they were asked to set goals, and so a lot of them said I should do something every day for that class. So I think needing to just spell that out to them. And even with our student teachers, some of them, if we do something online, we get the comment, well, I don't think I'm going to make it to class today because we're not going to do that much anyway. Or are we going to do anything important today? And I would say, every day you come, we're going to do something important. But I think students are almost like picking and choosing. This is what I think I can do today, and I don't want to do this today. And so we've talked a lot about maybe just building in more student choice.
Yeah, Roel, just to add to that, I don't have any undergraduate classes, but I do have 2 undergraduate sons who are both taking 5 and 6 classes each. And so, not in the so what frame, but in the now what frame, someone put in there, standardize our Blackboard courses. Imagine a student who has 6 classes, and I have imagined it because I've seen my students' class, I've seen my 2 sons' classes, and every instructor has their own creative design put into that Blackboard course site. And so now a kid is trying to manage 5 of those. It's no wonder that you get responses like that where they can't find it or they don't know what to do. As much as we are, we're focused on our class with them, they're trying to manage those 5 classes. So undergraduate, especially, graduate might be a little bit different than that. But even at graduate level, just to be a little vulnerable, I've been working on it for 6 years. Since I've gotten here is trying to design Blackboard courses so that my students don't have navigation issues. And inherently, every semester with my student course evaluations, I still get some feedback about, I don't like Blackboard. I can't find stuff, it's not intuitive, blah, blah, blah. So, I think that's definitely a now what. I mean, I know we're looking at a new LMS. And hey, prelude to the meeting, Justin's going to be talking about the LMS a little bit. So if you want to stick around, and I didn't do that purposely, but I think it is an issue for our students. And I think, Layla, your point about the for-profit versus the nonprofit, they're putting more money behind that kind of stuff to make sure that that's not the issue in terms of learning versus those of us in the nonprofit public institutions. We don't have that kind of resources.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. I think, really, it's a solution that the LMS vendors have provided. So, all modern LMSs, which I would not say our existing Blackboard is a modern LMS, they lock you down to I shouldn't say that strongly, but they tie you to a pretty specific format. So that's my big concern from my instructional designer perspective is when we move to the new LMS in 2023, it's no matter what we choose, it's going to be significantly more locked. That's going to solve this problem that we all just said is a problem. The problem for faculty then is going to be, as Rick said, people put their own creative spin on things, and that creative spin, it is not necessarily going to work in the new format, which is better for students, but it's just a matter of everybody kind of going to that. And I do think we've tried to address this issue. So last year we changed the default template of all courses to kind of have the weekly content area. So we're at least suggesting a way that you could do it that would be consistent. But again, you have so much freedom in our version of Blackboard that you can do really whatever you want.
I'm just looking at the now what slide, and just again, there's some really good ideas there related to offering multiple sections of courses so that students have choices in terms of the type of delivery that they want to experience, whether that's face-to-face, hybrid, high flex, or dual modality. We talked about the standardizing of course designs, asking students feedback during the semester. What should I keep? What should I throw away? I think many of us have been involved in that mid-semester kind of check-in with our students. So that's a really good suggestion. And I'm just reading some of them now because I know we're getting close to the end of our time. Learn how to maximize online teaching and learning based on new ways, not old ways in new contexts. And I think that's a great, post because it relates back to what Layla was saying. In some regards, the pandemic has pushed us into a place of we have been experiencing and trying to teach in new ways. And initially we were kind of just thrust into it like, hey, all your classes are going online, figure it out. But now that we're getting to close to the other side of it, I think Layla's point is a good one. We need to invest in people. This is a people business, and we need to invest in the people. If you want your people to do something different than what they've been doing before, you have to invest in them in terms of professional learning. And I do believe that FTLC offers quite a bit of opportunity. It's just that you have to know where it is, you have to know what they're offering, and you have to engage. And so but it is important that we keep professional learning on the front burner for instructors so that they have opportunities to grow. I just recently came off of winter 2021. I came off of a FLC, not related to teaching, but it was related to writing for publication. And we went into it with the idea of, hey, we're going to learn how to write to publish. But what happened was we created a community of learners that, I'm now exiting that experience, and I'm going to those people for a lot more than just writing. We talk about many other things. So in my opinion, FLCs are a great way for us to grow professionally in terms of our best practice instructionally. And I guess I would just want to thank you all for being here today, for talking about this big topic, because there's a lot of implications going forward for us, in terms of how do we tackle our students' needs, not just academically, but as somebody already mentioned, many people mentioned, emotionally. Social and emotional learning has to be a big account, not just for them, but Judy and others pointed this out, for ourselves as well. We got to watch out for ourselves, make sure that we're okay. And we can't tackle that all individually. I think we need to collectively keep that in mind and figure out, how does the organization support the needs of the people that are trying to deliver this high quality learning experience. So with that, what I'd like to do is end our BigByte session for this morning, and